1 million years ago, the world was both familiar and utterly alien, a place where the landscapes we know today were still recognisable in outline, but the animals and the humans who walked among them were part of a very different story. And if you could stand quietly on the edge of a savannah in East Africa, with the wind carrying the smell of dust and grass, you would see figures moving slowly across the open plain, not yet us, but not entirely unlike us, the last members of the Paranthropus line, squat and powerful, heavy-jawed and chewing endlessly on tough roots, fruits, and fibrous plants, their faces wide and robust, their teeth ground down from years of labouring through meals that no modern human would consider food, and nearby, watching them with quieter, more calculating eyes, were the early members of what we might finally call real humans, ancestors not yet Homo sapiens, but belonging to the lineage that would one day produce us, Homo erectus, tall, long-limbed, more graceful, and carrying with them a different rhythm of life, one shaped by tools, by fire, and by the steady spreading curiosity that would eventually lead their descendants across the globe. The age around 1 million years ago was a turning point in the long, slow flow of evolution, a moment when one branch of our family tree was fading into silence, while another was finding its stride, and the contrast between Paranthropus and the early humans was stark. For Paranthropus had been specialists, chewing machines shaped for survival in a narrow ecological niche, while Homo erectus and their kin were generalists, opportunists, able to survive in varied environments, from woodlands to open grasslands, from lake shores to rocky hills, and this flexibility would prove decisive, because in evolution it is often not the strongest who endure, but those who can bend, adapt, and change when the world shifts around them. The climate of Earth during this time was unstable, swinging back and forth between colder glacial intervals and warmer interglacial periods, the great cycles of the ice ages that shaped much of human evolution, and these fluctuations altered rainfall, vegetation, and animal populations, creating pressures that rewarded those who could think, plan, and move, while punishing those locked too tightly into one way of life. Imagine the dawn on such a day 1 million years ago. The sun rises over a horizon of tall grasses broken by scattered acacia trees. The air still cool from the night, and the cries of distant birds echo across the plain. A small band of Paranthropus moves slowly, hunched over, picking at tubers pulled from the ground, chewing with deliberate patience. Their world is shrinking, the forest they once relied on dwindling, the tough roots and bark becoming harder to find in abundance. Not far away, another band is stirring, Homo erectus, their camp marked by the faint smell of a fire smouldering from the night before, a circle of stones arranged around ash. They do not speak in words as we know them, but their gestures, sounds, and glances carry meaning, binding them together in shared action, in a life that is no longer just about chewing, but about making, planning, and moving forward. The Acheulean hand axe, that elegant teardrop-shaped tool, was already in their hands by this time, shaped carefully from stone, chipped on both sides until its edge was sharp, versatile enough to cut meat, scrape hides, and dig for tubers. It was not just a tool but a sign of thought, of patience, of a vision held in the mind and brought into the world through repeated skilled strikes. Fire, too, was part of their story, though perhaps not yet fully mastered everywhere, but enough to warm, to cook, to keep predators at bay. The contrast with Paranthropus is striking, for while the robust jaws and massive molars of Paranthropus had been their adaptation, a tool built into their very bodies, Homo erectus carried their tools outside the body, in stone, in fire, in culture, a shift that made all the difference. As the day unfolds, predators prowl at the edges. Lions, hyenas, saber-toothed cats, and packs of wild dogs roam the savannas, each a threat to both Paranthropus and Homo alike. Yet the strategies of survival differ. Paranthropus scatter and rely on strength, moving into thickets, climbing trees, or simply enduring through numbers, while Homo erectus groups gather together, clutching stones, waving branches set alight, their collective presence enough to deter many attackers. Over countless generations, these small differences accumulate, shaping destinies. It is easy to imagine this world as a simple contest of strength, but the truth is slower, more subtle. For hundreds of thousands of years, Paranthropus had thrived, living alongside other hominins, their wide zygomatic arches and sagittal crests hallmarks of a line finely tuned for grinding plant matter. They had watched species rise and fall, climates shift, predators evolve, and yet through it all they had survived. But 1 million years ago their time was waning. The expanding brains of Homo erectus, the long-distance endurance running that allowed them to track animals under the hot sun until prey collapsed from exhaustion, the ability to share food, to pass on skills, to create bonds that extended beyond the immediate family. These were advantages that did not strike in a single blow, but worked slowly, like water wearing away stone. We can close our eyes and drift into the rhythms of such a life. Picture the long walk of a hunting party under a relentless midday sun, the shimmering air distorting the horizon. They move not with speed but with patience, tracking the faint signs of antelope ahead, a broken twig, a hoofprint in the dust, a patch of disturbed grass. Step by step, hour by hour they follow, until the animal falters, until their persistence wins where brute force could not. In the distance, Paranthropus are crouched in shade, gnawing on stems and fibrous shoots, their bodies built for chewing but not for chasing. Each strategy is valid, but in the long game of evolution, one would prove more enduring. The nights, too, tell the story. Paranthropus huddles in darkness, listening to the roars of lions, vulnerable until the sun returns. Homo erectus, though, gathers near the glow of embers, fire casting flickering shadows on faces, the crackle of wood breaking the silence. Around these fires, bonds deepen. Food is shared, tools are sharpened, lessons are silently observed. The human story begins not with sudden leaps, but with these slow rituals of survival, repeated night after night, year after year, until they shape not just survival, but identity. 1 million years ago, Africa was not the only stage. Homo erectus had already spread far beyond, reaching into Eurasia, into lands where winters bit harder, where survival demanded clothing, shelters, and strategies that Paranthropus would never have needed or imagined. In Dmanisi, in Georgia, fossils reveal their presence. Small-bodied, still experimenting with what it meant to be human, yet undeniably part of the story that would reach across continents. Meanwhile, in Asia, Homo erectus thrived for hundreds of thousands of years, their Acheulean tools marking the passage of time in layers of soil and stone. Paranthropus, by contrast, remained bound to Africa, unable to adapt beyond the shrinking ecosystems of their home. The ending of Paranthropus was not sudden, not a catastrophe of fire or flood, but a slow dwindling. Fewer young survived, fewer groups thrived. Their numbers faded quietly, and the fossil record closes its book on them around this time, leaving only teeth, jaws, and fragments of skull to whisper their story. Yet even in their extinction, they remind us of the experiments of evolution, the countless ways life has tried to solve the problem of survival, and how fragile every solution is in the face of change. And so the world 1 million years ago becomes a crossroads, where one lineage fades while another grows stronger, where the chewing muscles of Paranthropus yield to the thinking brains of Homo erectus, where survival shifts from what is carried in the body to what is carried in the mind. The savannas echo with the sound of footsteps, of stone striking stone, of fires crackling in the night, and though the figures who lived then did not know it, they were carrying forward the story that would one day become us. The world 1 million years ago was not empty, though it was quieter than ours, with fewer voices, fewer kinds of humans, and yet the earth itself was restless, shifting beneath their feet in slow geological rhythms that none could see, but all would feel. The Rift Valley stretched across East Africa like a scar. Mountains rose and eroded, rivers shifted their courses, lakes filled and dried, and through it all the creatures that lived here had to adapt. Herds of elephants, far larger than those we know today, roamed in great arcs, pulling down trees and opening paths across the grasslands. Antelopes grazed in cautious groups, always scanning for danger. Crocodiles lingered in the waters, patient and ancient. Birds, great and small, filled the skies with their endless migrations, and somewhere in the midst of this great web of life, humans, real humans in the making, were learning how to fit themselves into the pattern. The story of Paranthropus at this time is a story of limitation, of being bound by a narrow way of life. Their skulls tell us of massive chewing muscles, anchored by ridges of bone, pulling on jaws made to grind and crush. Their diet was tough, fibrous and monotonous, and though it had kept them alive for nearly 2 million years, it also left them trapped, unable to shift easily when new foods or new strategies were needed. In contrast, the humans who would outlast them were experimenting. They were scavengers and hunters, gatherers and foragers, capable of cracking open bones for marrow, roasting tubers in fire, cutting flesh with stone, and imagining new ways to live. At a waterhole on a dry season's day, both Paranthropus and Homo erectus might arrive. The air is heavy with thirst, the mud churned by countless hooves. Paranthropus drink quickly and retreat to safety, wary of predators. Homo erectus linger longer, watching, learning the patterns of the animals, noting which herds arrive first and which predators wait nearby. They are not yet masters of the world, but they are observers, and this watchfulness is its own form of power. The brains of Homo erectus were larger than those of Paranthropus, though not yet as large as ours, but size was not the only change. It was how those brains were used, how they allowed cooperation, planning, and memory to weave together. A mother could teach her child to strike stone against stone, to see in a rough block of rock the shape of a hand axe waiting to emerge. A group could share meat from a carcass, spreading nutrition in a way that strengthened bonds and improved survival. Over time, these habits became traditions, unspoken but powerful, carried not in the body but in the mind. As evening falls on the savannah, the air cooling at last, we can imagine the slow gathering of people around fire. The glow illuminates their faces, the smoke rises into the star-filled sky, and though no words as we know them are spoken, meaning passes between them. A gesture points to the horizon, a sound indicates danger, a touch reassures a child. These are the first seeds of language, not yet flowering but already taking root. The silence of Paranthropus is different. They communicate too, of course, but their world is narrower, their tools absent, their traditions simpler. It is not that they lacked intelligence, but that their path had led them into a corner from which there was little escape. Time in this era is slow. Generations pass with little visible change, yet across hundreds of thousands of years the differences become profound. A group of Homo erectus ventures farther than before, following rivers into new lands, carrying their fire with them, learning new foods, meeting new challenges. Another group remains, refining their tools, passing knowledge from elder to youth. In this way, the human lineage becomes a tapestry, woven from movement and memory, while Paranthropus slowly unravels. Predators test both species, and here too we see the differences. A lion charges at dusk, scattering Paranthropus into the brush, each saving themselves as best they can. But when the same predator approaches Homo erectus, stones are hurled, sticks brandished, fire waved in defiance. The attack is not always stopped, but often enough the collective effort succeeds. From such moments comes confidence, the recognition that together they are stronger than alone. This, too, is part of becoming human. In the forests that still fringe the grasslands, the cries of other primates echo. Baboons, colobus monkeys, chimpanzees, each living their own patterns of life. They too use tools in simple ways. They too form bonds and pass on habits, and in them we glimpse echoes of the path our ancestors once walked. But Homo erectus has gone farther. They have crossed a threshold, relying not only on what is given by nature, but on what can be shaped by hand and thought. A stick becomes a digging tool, a stone becomes a blade, fire becomes warmth and safety. This shift may seem small, but in truth it is the hinge on which the story of humanity turns. The days stretch into seasons, and the seasons into years, and across them the balance shifts. Paranthropus populations dwindle. Each year fewer are born, fewer reach adulthood. Homo erectus, by contrast, spreads slowly but surely, their numbers growing, their territories widening. In caves and open plains, on lake shores and riverbanks, their traces remain in stone, in ash, in bone. They leave behind not just fossils but stories, if we know how to listen. the story is not one of triumph in the moment, but of endurance across millennia. For a child born into Homo erectus society, life is still hard. Disease, injury, predators, hunger, all threaten daily. Many die young, and those who survive grow up quickly, learning by watching, imitating, practicing until the skills are second nature. But unlike Paranthropus, they do not face the world alone. They face it together, and this makes all the difference. And as the stars wheel overhead, night after night, generation after generation, the great experiment of humanity gathers strength. The last Paranthropus chew their last roots, their heavy jaws grinding away at the plants that sustained them for so long. But the world no longer favours them. The grasslands expand, the forests shrink, the climate shifts, and in this changing world their path comes to an end. It is not dramatic. There is no single day when the last one dies. Instead, their presence fades slowly until the earth holds them no more, and in their place Homo erectus stands, a figure both ancient and strangely familiar, carrying forward the spark of what we will one day become. The silence that follows the passing of Paranthropus is not empty. It is filled with the footsteps of those who remain, with the rhythm of stone on stone, with the murmur of early voices forming meaning in the air. The savannas are still alive with danger, the river still heavy with crocodiles, the night still full of unseen eyes. But humanity, in its earliest true form, has begun to walk its long path, and 1 million years ago marks the place where the trail of one branch ends and another begins. The Earth 1 million years ago was a place of edges and transitions, a world where old species lingered while new ones pushed forward, where climates swung back and forth in long, slow rhythms, and where every living thing had to find a way to bend with the changes or be left behind. In the quiet stretches of Africa, where the grasslands rolled out under wide skies, the echoes of two different kinds of human life could still be found. On one side, the last of the Paranthropus, broad-faced and powerfully built, their bodies shaped by countless generations of chewing the unyielding gifts of the land. On the other side, the expanding presence of Homo erectus, thinner in face, longer in limb, with a mind that was beginning to reach beyond the immediate needs of hunger and shelter, towards something more: connection, planning, foresight. It is tempting to think of Paranthropus as failures, but in truth for nearly 2 million years they had succeeded. Their massive jaws and grinding teeth had been a solution, an adaptation that carried them through forests and grasslands, through times of plenty and times of scarcity. They endured alongside other hominins, living their lives in groups, foraging, raising their young, and facing the same predators and challenges as all who walked the ancient earth. Their end came not because they were weak, but because the world changed, and because another kind of human arrived whose flexibility allowed them to adapt in ways that Paranthropus could not. The extinction of Paranthropus is not a story of defeat, but of the relentless movement of time, which spares no form, no matter how strong. As we drift through the scenes of this distant past, we notice the rhythms of daily life. A group of Homo erectus moves in the early light, their stone hand axes clutched in hands that know the weight and balance of the tool without needing to think. They follow a herd of grazing animals, patient, steady, their eyes searching for signs of weakness. Somewhere ahead, an antelope limps, its step uneven, its body already marked by exhaustion. The humans track it for hours, their steady pace outlasting the animal's bursts of speed, until at last it falters. Then, with stones and sharpened wood, they finish the work, taking meat, marrow and hide. It is not just a meal. It is a moment that strengthens the group, feeds the young, and deepens the habit of cooperation. Nearby, Paranthropus move with different intent. They search the edges of the forest for roots to dig, for fruits to pluck, for shoots to chew. Their jaws are strong, their bellies filling slowly with what the land provides, but the rewards are smaller, the energy gained harder to come by. When predators appear, they scatter into the trees or find refuge in numbers, but they do not stand together as Homo erectus do. Their life is not worse, only different, a strategy that worked until the world tilted away from their favour. The air in this time was alive with other creatures, many now gone, enormous elephants, ancestors of the ones we know, moved in herds so vast that the ground shook beneath them. Saber-toothed cats crouched in grasses, their long fangs gleaming as they waited for the moment to strike. Hyenas, larger and stronger than those of today, laughed and howled as they competed for carcasses. Birds with wingspans that blotted out the sun wheeled overhead, their migrations stretching across continents. In such a world, humans were small, fragile, easy prey. And yet they survived, not by being stronger or faster, but by being together, by noticing, by remembering, and by using their hands and their minds in ways no other creature could. Night falls again, as it always does, and the two groups of humans respond differently. Paranthropus huddle in darkness, perhaps climbing into trees, waiting for dawn to return, their safety dependent on silence and endurance. Homo erectus gathers by their fire, the flames pushing back the dark, the sparks rising into the night. The fire is warmth, protection, and light, but it is also more. It draws them close, face to face, and in the glow they learn from one another. Children watch as elders strike stones, as gestures pass along knowledge. The first glimmers of culture live in these fires, not written, not spoken in words as we know them, but shared nonetheless, carried forward in memory and imitation. 1,000,000 years is a vast span of time, and across it Homo erectus begins to move farther and farther from Africa. Their bones appear in Asia, their tools found in Europe. They cross landscapes of snow and desert, forest and plain, each new place demanding new solutions. And in each place they bend and adapt, shaping their lives to fit the land. Paranthropus does not follow. Their bodies are tied to Africa, tied to the foods and forests that shaped them. As the climate shifts, the forests thin and the grasslands spread, their numbers decline. Each birth is a chance, but fewer survive, fewer thrive, and so the long line of Paranthropus draws quietly to its close. Yet we must remember them, for they are part of us, not in blood perhaps, but in story. They show us that humanity has never been a single straight path but a branching tree, with many experiments, many forms, many ways of being alive. The survival of Homo erectus does not erase the meaning of Paranthropus, for both are chapters in the same book, both answers to the question of how to live in a changing world. And as the seasons turn, the cycle repeats. Rain falls and rivers swell, filling the air with the calls of frogs and the rush of water. Dry winds return, cracking the soil, driving herds to wander farther. Fires sweep the plains, clearing the grasses, leaving blackened earth that soon greens again. Life pulses forward, and in the midst of it humans move, one group fading, another growing, each step carrying the story farther from the beginning and closer to the future. The last of the Paranthropus perhaps did not know they were the last. They lived as their ancestors had, chewing, foraging, raising young. The world narrowed around them, opportunities closing off, but in their eyes was still the spark of life, the determination to survive another day. Extinction is never felt in a single heartbeat. It comes slowly, like the tide receding until one day the shore is empty. And when it was empty, the earth did not pause, for other footsteps were already echoing, carrying the story onward. 1,000,000 years ago, the first real humans were already on their way, not yet us, but carrying within them the seeds of what we would become. Their tools, their fire, their bonds, their memory, these were the beginnings of humanity as we know it. The Paranthropus lived out their last days in the same lands, a parallel existence that slowly slipped into silence. And in that silence the story of us grew stronger, step by step, across continents, across ages, until the world was no longer theirs, but ours. The slow passage of time in that ancient world was marked not by clocks or calendars, but by the cycles of nature, the rising and setting of the sun, the call of birds in the morning, the patterns of migration that swept across the grasslands. For the humans who lived 1,000,000 years ago, time was measured in hunger and fullness, in danger and safety, in the turning of seasons that brought rain or drought, abundance or scarcity. Each sunrise was not a promise of the distant future, but simply another chance to endure the present. On a morning heavy with mist, a group of Homo erectus might stir near their fire, the embers coaxed back to life with dried grass and careful breath. The youngest watch, wide-eyed, as sparks catch and flames spread, the magic of fire still fresh and fragile in their world. For them, this is survival, but it is also continuity. What was learned yesterday is repeated today, and what is repeated today will be remembered tomorrow. Slowly, over thousands of lifetimes, this becomes tradition, a memory carried not in words, but in practice, binding one generation to the next. Nearby, the last of the Paranthropus live in a different rhythm. Their mornings are quieter, their needs more solitary. They do not carry fire with them, they do not shape stone with foresight, but they move with practiced knowledge of plants, of where to dig for roots, of which fruits ripen in which season. Their world is smaller, but it is enough for a time. When they climb a tree to pluck fruit, when they dig into hard soil with powerful fingers, they are repeating patterns that worked for nearly 2 million years. Yet around them the forests shrink, the foods become harder to find, and the competition grows. The predators of this time are relentless. In the grasses, a saber-toothed cat crouches low, its amber eyes fixed on a herd of grazing antelope. With a sudden burst it charges, scattering the herd in all directions. One falls, caught in the cat's jaws, the long teeth piercing deep. Later, hyenas arrive, their laughter sharp and echoing, driving the cat away, tearing at the remains with bone-crushing jaws. Far off, vultures circle, their wings beating heavy in the air, waiting their turn. Into this chain of hunger step the humans, watching, learning. Paranthropus stay at a distance, unwilling to risk the danger. Homo erectus, however, waits patiently, knowing that when the predators are finished, bones and scraps will remain. With stones, they break the bones, extracting the rich marrow, feeding themselves on what others leave behind. It is not glorious, but it is survival, and survival is enough. The landscape itself shapes the humans who walk upon it. The Rift Valley is alive with shifting earth, lakes forming and drying, rivers cutting new paths through the land. In the distance, mountains rise, their peaks capped with snow, even as the plains below bake in the sun. The air is filled with dust, with the cries of birds, with the endless hum of insects. To live here is to adapt constantly, to be ready for the world to change with little warning. Homo erectus thrives in this challenge. They follow the herds, they track the rains, they move when the land demands it. Paranthropus, tied more closely to the plants and forests, finds fewer places to call home. As we drift through the scenes of these ancient days, it becomes clear that the story of humanity is not one of sudden leaps, but of endless repetition. Day after day, the same actions are performed: digging, chewing, cutting, carrying, walking, watching. Yet across thousands of years, these repetitions accumulate. The child who watches their parent knap stone will one day strike their own hand axe, perhaps better than the one before. The group that tends a fire carefully will one day pass on that knowledge to children who travel to new lands. The patterns ripple outward, slow but unstoppable. In the evenings, when the heat fades and the first stars appear, Homo erectus gathers in quiet circles. They do not tell stories as we do, but they share presence, and presence is powerful. A hand rests on a shoulder, a gesture passes food, a sound signals agreement. These are not yet words, but they are more than silence, and within them lies the seed of language. Over time, the need to communicate, to coordinate hunts, to warn of danger, to teach skills, will press language into being. It begins here, in the quiet murmur of early humans around their fires. Paranthropus too communicates, but their world does not demand the same complexity. Their groups are smaller, their strategies simpler. They live as their ancestors did, with little change across the ages. Their faces, wide and powerful, speak of strength, but their future grows shorter with every passing season. They are specialists in a world that rewards generalists, and slowly, quietly, they vanish from the record. Their last days are unmarked, unnoticed even by themselves, for extinction does not announce itself. It comes quietly until only absence remains. Meanwhile, Homo erectus walks farther. Their footprints cross the lands of Asia. Their tools appear in Europe. Their bones rest in soils far from Africa. They learn to endure cold, to endure heat, to endure hunger. They fashion clothing from hides. They build shelters from branches and stone. They shape their lives around the needs of their group. With every step they take, the world becomes a little more theirs, and the story of humanity grows longer. The animals around them change as well. Some vanish forever, their bones left in the earth. Others adapt, surviving alongside humans for thousands of years. The elephants grow smaller over time. The great predators shift and fade. The herds of antelope move as they always have, driven by rain and grass. In this shifting web of life, humans are not yet dominant, but they are persistent, and persistence is its own form of power. And so the days pass into years, the years into centuries, the centuries into ages. The line of Paranthropus fades completely, their bones the only trace of their long experiment. Homo erectus, in contrast, grows in number, in skill, in reach. They are still far from us, far from language and art and cities, but they are closer than any who came before. In their hands, in their fire, in their bonds, we see the beginnings of what will one day be called humanity. 1 million years ago, the world was not ours, but it was becoming ours. Slowly, patiently, step by step, the first real humans carried the spark forward, even as the last of Paranthropus carried their final embers into the dark. And in that moment of transition, the path that would one day lead to us was already set, unfolding across time like the endless savanna under the wide and ancient sky. The story of 1 million years ago is not just a story of species but of landscapes, for the earth itself was shaping the path of those who lived upon it. Across Africa, climates shifted back and forth, rains returning and retreating, lakes swelling and shrinking, forests spreading and then disappearing again. The land was in constant motion, and with it, every creature was forced to bend or to vanish. For humans, this meant learning to live in worlds that were never stable, to follow the changing patterns and to carry with them the memory of what had worked before. It was not intelligence in the way we think of it today, but it was something deeper, an instinct for adaptation that would one day become the hallmark of our kind. On the banks of a drying river, Homo erectus works with stone. A large cobble is struck with another, again and again, flakes flying off in sharp shards. Each blow is deliberate, patient, guided by a vision of the tool that waits within the rock. The process is not random, not simple smashing, but a pattern, repeated countless times across countless generations, passed down through observation. The result is a hand axe, sharp-edged and balanced, a tool that can cut, dig, scrape, and chop. In this single object lies the story of thought made visible, of minds able to shape not just the present moment, but the future task. It is this ability, more than muscle or jaw, that sets them apart from Paranthropus. For the last of the Paranthropus, the days are harder. Their bodies are well suited for grinding roots and chewing stems, but the plants are fewer now, the forests less generous. They can survive, yes, but each year demands more effort, more searching, more endurance. Their groups grow smaller, their range narrower. When they encounter Homo erectus, there is no great battle, no clash of species, only quiet competition. Where one can adapt, the other cannot. Where one can walk farther, the other lingers behind. And so, slowly, inevitably, one line thrives while the other dwindles. Imagine the endless walking of Homo erectus across the savannah. Their bodies are built for it, long legs carrying them steadily over the open land. They are not sprinters but endurance runners, capable of pursuing animals until exhaustion takes the prey. This persistence hunting, combined with patience and coordination, allows them to bring down creatures much larger than themselves. With fire, they cook the meat, making it easier to chew and safer to eat. With stone, they divide it into pieces, sharing it among the group. In this sharing, bonds deepen, and survival becomes collective. The nights bring both fear and comfort. In the dark, the roars of lions echo. The laughter of hyenas rises. The eyes of predators gleam in the firelight. For Paranthropus, the night is endured in silence, waiting for dawn. For Homo erectus, the night is endured together, with fire as a shield. They gather close, the flames dancing on their faces, the warmth driving back the chill. The children doze, the adults keep watch, and in this simple act, the shape of humanity grows clearer. To share fire is to share trust. to create a circle where each belongs. Beyond Africa, the journey continues. In Asia, the remains of Homo erectus testify to their spread. In caves and river valleys, their tools lie buried in the soil, evidence of their presence far from the land of their origin. To reach these places required not only endurance but also imagination, the ability to leave the known behind and face the unknown with only fire, stone, and each other. This courage, though unspoken, marks them as truly human, for to step into uncertainty is a kind of faith in tomorrow. Back in Africa, the final days of Paranthropus unfold unnoticed. There is no last moment marked in stone, no single fossil that tells the end. Instead, their presence fades slowly, their fossils growing fewer in the record. Perhaps they survived in isolated pockets for a time, clinging to familiar foods in shrinking habitats. Perhaps small groups lingered while the larger world moved on, but eventually there were no more. Their experiment in survival was complete, and the Earth turned the page to another chapter. The Earth itself is patient, and in its patience it holds the memory of all who walked upon it. In the soil lie the bones of Paranthropus, heavy jaws and teeth worn from years of chewing. In the soil lie the tools of Homo erectus, sharp flakes and carefully shaped axes. Together they tell the story of a moment when the old gave way to the new, when one kind of human ended and another began. And though we often imagine ourselves as the inevitable outcome, the truth is more fragile. We're here not because we were destined to be, but because of countless small chances, countless tiny survivals, stretching back to this distant age. Picture again the savannah at dusk. The sky glows red as the sun sinks, the grass is swaying in the breeze, the shadows lengthening. A group of Homo erectus moves slowly toward their camp, carrying meat wrapped in hide, their tools clutched in calloused hands. Their steps are steady, their eyes alert, their hearts beating with the rhythm of survival. Nearby, unseen, a small band of Paranthropus finds shelter among the trees, chewing quietly, their eyes watching the fading light. Two ways of life, side by side, but only one will continue. The silence of one becomes the inheritance of the other, and in that silence we find our beginning. In the long view of time, 1 million years ago was neither the beginning nor the end, but it was a hinge, a place where paths crossed and diverged. On one side, the Paranthropus line, sturdy, specialised and bound to the foods of the forest. On the other, Homo erectus, versatile, restless, and bound not to one place but to movement itself. Their coexistence tells us that humanity was never a single thread, but a braided cord, strands twisting together, some fraying, some continuing. What we see as progress was not inevitable, but the outcome of landscapes shifting, climates altering, and choices made in silence under the open sky. The rhythm of Homo erectus life was shaped by fire. A branch struck by lightning or a smouldering patch of grass became the source of something precious. To carry fire was to carry safety, to carry warmth, to carry light. Over generations, the skill of tending flames deepened. Dried grass and twigs were gathered, embers carefully shielded, wood placed in a circle of stones. Though they could not yet make fire from nothing, they learned to hold it, to keep it alive. Fire gave them cooked roots, softened marrow, roasted meat. It gave them evenings of light in a world otherwise dark. It gave them time to sit, to rest, to notice each other. Around fire, humanity found its first hearths, and with hearths came belonging. For Paranthropus, the day was still bound to the sun. They fed when the light was strong, slept when the night grew heavy, and woke again with the dawn. Their tools were simple, if present at all, sticks for digging, stones for cracking nuts. Their strength was their own bodies, the power of their jaws, the endurance of their chewing. They had survived for nearly 1 million years before this point, their way of life steady, unchanged, familiar. Yet it was precisely this steadiness that became their weakness. In a world that shifted often, those who could not bend eventually broke. The plains were alive with animals, and every species carried its own strategies. Antelope fled in bursts of speed, zebras stayed in herds for protection, elephants roamed far in search of water. Predators lurked at every edge, lions stalking the grass, leopards in the branches, crocodiles in the rivers. For Homo erectus, survival required more than strength. It required foresight. They studied patterns, knew when herds would move, when rains would come, when danger was near. They worked together, one chasing, one waiting, one striking. In this coordination lay the beginnings of something greater than instinct. It was memory woven with cooperation, thought carried not in one head but in many. Picture a hunt at dusk. The group fans out across the grasslands, their feet silent on the earth. They move not with the speed of predators, but with the patience of persistence. An antelope startles and runs, but they do not stop. They follow, hour after hour, mile after mile, until exhaustion drains the animal's strength. At last it stumbles, and the hunters close in. With stone hand axes they finish the task, cutting through hide and flesh, dividing the meat. There is no waste. Bones are cracked for marrow, sinews stripped for cord, hides taken for wrapping. Each part is carried back to the waiting fire where children and elders gather. In the sharing of the meal, the group survives together. The end of Paranthropus was quiet. There was no predator that destroyed them, no disease that swept them away, no sudden disaster that erased them. Instead, it was the slow erosion of opportunity, the gradual loss of the habitats they depended on, the creeping pressure of competition. Each year brought fewer resources, each generation saw smaller groups. Perhaps they lingered in pockets of forest, isolated and unseen, their numbers dwindling. Perhaps they held on for centuries after their cousins had already spread far beyond. But the record grows thin, the fossils rare, until their presence fades into silence. Yet even in extinction, they remain part of the human story. Their bones remind us that survival is not guaranteed, that strength alone is not enough. They remind us that evolution is not a straight line but a branching tree, many twigs cut short while others reach farther. And they remind us that we too are temporary, shaped by the same forces of change, vulnerable to the same shifts in climate and chance. The last days of Paranthropus were not a failure, but a chapter in the vast unfolding of life. As Homo erectus spread, they carried with them more than tools and fire. They carried an attitude toward the world, a willingness to go farther, to face uncertainty. Across rivers, over mountains, into colder lands they ventured. Their footprints are found in places where no human had walked before, their tools buried in soils far from Africa. Each step outward was a gamble, yet each step also expanded the possibility of survival. By refusing to be tied to one place, they became the first true wanderers, the first to give humanity its global path. The landscape itself bore witness. Volcanic ash settled on tools and bones, preserving them for us to find. Riverbeds shifted, covering campsites in layers of sand. Caves sheltered families whose remains still lie hidden in the stone. Each fossil, each tool, each trace is a fragment of a story, incomplete yet powerful. Together they tell us that 1 million years ago was not empty but full of lives lived, days endured, fires tended, meals shared. These lives were not less human than ours, only earlier, quieter, still forming the shape we would one day recognize. And so, when we think of the last days of Paranthropus and the first real humans, we should not imagine a moment of victory or defeat. We should imagine evenings on the savannah, fires burning low, voices murmuring in the dark. We should imagine the chewing of roots in a forest clearing, the steady crack of jaws on tough stems. We should imagine children learning by watching, imitating the hands of their elders, whether in shaping stone or stripping bark. These were ordinary lives, simple yet profound, and it was in their ordinariness that humanity found its ground. The march of time is relentless, and yet within its flow there are moments that seem to linger, stretched out across the millennia. 1 million years ago was one such moment, suspended between endings and beginnings. For Paranthropus, it was the end of an experiment in survival, a path that had once thrived but was no longer suited to the changing world. For Homo erectus, it was the strengthening of a new path, a way of living that embraced change, movement, and fire. These two lives, side by side, tell us that humanity was never simple, never single, but always diverse, always branching. Imagine the contrast one last time. In the forest shade, a Paranthropus bends low, fingers gripping a tough root pulled from the earth. The jaws work slowly, tirelessly, grinding the fibres into pulp, chewing for hours to gain what little nourishment the plant can offer. The body is powerful, the face broad, the life simple yet enduring. But the forest is thinner now, the roots harder to find, and each year brings fewer returns. This way of life, once enough, is now a struggle. Out on the open plain, Homo erectus moves with a different rhythm. Their group travels far, carrying with them the glowing coals of fire wrapped in bark and ash. They pause where water runs, where animals gather, where stone can be shaped. Their meals are varied, meat roasted on sticks, roots softened in the fire, marrow sucked from bones. Their nights are spent in circles of flame, the firelight flickering on faces, the crackle of wood mingling with the distant calls of beasts. They are not secure, not invincible, but they are adaptable, and that is enough. Over time, the numbers shift. The groups of Paranthropus grow smaller, their voices fewer in the forests. The groups of Homo erectus grow larger, their footsteps spreading wider across the earth. There is no moment when one sees the other vanish, no final farewell. Only the slow passage of years, the quiet disappearance of one kind of human and the persistence of another. And yet, in that disappearance, there is no emptiness. The bones remain, silent witnesses buried in soil and stone. The teeth, massive and worn, speak of lives spent in chewing, of bodies shaped by the foods of the earth. The fossils tell us not of failure but of existence, of beings who lived fully in their time, who survived for nearly 1 million years. Their end was not sudden but gradual, their story not erased but woven into ours. Homo erectus would continue for ages yet, their hand axes scattered across continents, their fires glowing in countless nights. They would endure far longer than we have so far, a testament to their resilience. And from them, eventually, would come others. Species with larger brains, with new tools, with new ways of seeing the world. From them would come the ancestors who shaped language, art, memory, and finally us. But all of that was still far in the future. 1 million years ago, the story was simpler, quieter. A story of walking, of chewing, of firelight and roots. The world they lived in was different, yet in some ways the same. The stars above them were the same stars we see tonight, burning across the darkness. The moon rose and fell, casting its silver glow over the land. The rains came and went. Rivers swelled and shrank. The grasses turned gold and then green again. The cycles of the earth continued, and within those cycles lives unfolded, birth and death, hunger and satisfaction, fear and rest. They were human, though not quite us, and in their humanness we can still see ourselves. So as we drift back from this distant time, from the last days of Paranthropus and the steady rise of the first real humans, we carry with us not only the facts of their existence but the feeling of their world. The warmth of fire in the night, the endless patience of walking across the land, the quiet persistence of chewing roots in the shade, the soft murmur of voices, unrecorded yet real. They lived, as we live, caught between the past and the future, making each day enough. And though they are long gone, they remain within us, for we are the heirs of all who came before. Their endurance shaped our endurance, their choices shaped our possibilities. In their survival and their loss, they carved the path that led eventually to us. 1 million years ago was not the beginning of humanity, but it was one of the places where humanity took shape, where the outlines of what we would become grew clearer. And now, as we let the story settle into silence, we can close our eyes and rest. The fire burns low, the stars wheel slowly overhead, the voices fade into the dark. Paranthropus is gone, Homo erectus endures, and time moves forward, carrying us all. In this long, slow unfolding, we are but one moment, and yet a moment that carries within it the memory of countless others. So sleep now, gently, with the echoes of their world still lingering. Sleep with the rhythm of walking feet, with the crackle of fire, with the quiet patience of the past. Sleep knowing that humanity is not a line but a tapestry, woven of many threads, some ended, some continuing. sleep and dream of the long journey, for it is a journey we are still on. Good night, and greetings across the ages. May you rest as they once rested, beneath the same stars, within the same world, carried by the same time. May your dreams be steady, your sleep deep, and your heart calm. From the last days of Paranthropus to the first real humans, the story has been told, and now it is yours to carry into quiet rest.